What do you think about the idea that we only age the amount of time that we experience?
Person. So even just the systemic treatment generally reverses biologic age about 3 years per treatment. That's typically what we've seen. Some people more, some people less. Being invited to treat this baby was predicted by Intuitive. They described finding real masters that could do amazing things. Even just go to lunch and manifest their lunch by waving their hands.
Once you understand that you are that, then I think we're going to activate these dormant genes that keep us in coherence or entangled with the field more. Hi, all. In today's episode, I sit down with Dr. Todd Ovokaitys, a Johns Hopkins-trained medical doctor and leading researcher in stem cell therapy and regenerative medicine. In this episode, Dr. Todd shares his groundbreaking research, including his work on one of the rarest diseases called Progeria, which is essentially the Benjamin Button disease. It's a disease of accelerated aging, as well as his pioneering research in stem cell therapy using very small embryonic stem cells, or VSELs. As a co-inventor of the song laser, which stands for the Strachan-Ovokaitys Node Generator, which he uses in his stem cell therapy. And I was actually able to see this procedure done in his clinic in Southern California. It's non-invasive. They extract your blood, they pull the embryonic stem cells out, they activate them using the song laser as well as music that he's choreographed. So this is sound therapy activation. And then they re-inject it and use the laser to guide the cells towards where the patient needs it the most. It's simple. It can be done in a very short, maybe a half a day's visit to his clinic. And they're seeing amazing results with this. With 5 recent publications in stem cell therapy, Dr. Todd's contributions push regenerative medicine forward, offering new potentials in health and longevity. Beyond science, his musical contributions, composing symphonies and chorale, as well as dance choreography, deepen his holistic view and bridge arts and sciences for a unique perspective on health and aging. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion. We discussed scalar energy, eternal youth, the fountain of youth, his upcoming Aloha Choir in Maui on December 12th, 2024, where they will use music and vocal toning to awaken dormant interdimensional chromosomes. We cover the profound connections between consciousness, eternal youth, and quantum biology. Okay, yeah. So I wanted to welcome you and thank you for being here, to ask you what's fascinating you these days.
Well, probably our biggest news is that we recently received an FDA acceptance letter of our protocol to treat a rare childhood disease. And it's considered a rare pediatric disease indication. It's called Progeria. It's the genetic disease of the most accelerated aging that exists. And we've developed a method that can improve it. And the FDA has accepted our protocol to a clinical trial. And it's so rare that it's not phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. A single study with as few as 3 people may be all that we need for FDA approval.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, I heard you speaking about the little girl in Israel that has it. And I don't know what year that was filmed. So how's that going? How's she doing?
She had shown a variety of improvements, and we're working on bringing her here so we can do more treatments and do extensive epigenetic and biochemical testing to actually show that we can slow, stop, and even reverse the accelerated aging.
Do you want to explain how you're doing it?
Well, our core procedure uses a person's own stem cells. It's a very special class of stem cells with a long name, very small embryonic-like stem cells. And it's important that they're embryonic-like and not true embryonic. So the way things work in development, as the fertilized egg starts to divide, it gets to about a 30-cell stage, and all of those cells at that point would be called true embryonic stem cells, and they're very powerful. They're called totipotent. Each of them can make a whole new person, but they do have the possibility of creating tumors called teratomas, which, although they're benign, they're really weird. They can be cantaloupe-sized hairballs with skin and teeth,
Mm.
nails and bone and cartilage and all sorts of weird stuff. So we don't work with that, but just past embryonic is pluripotent. And that means that they can make anything. They form the three primary germ layers, endoderm, ectoderm, and mesoderm, and that forms everything else. So a pluripotent stem cell, in ways, the most versatile. It can make everything. And they're very small, which means they're small enough to go through the lungs when given IV and go anywhere from head to toe. Then we have a laser guidance process with what we call the song laser, because it sings the song of the stem cells in light, both to awaken them from their lifelong sleep and then to increase the probability that they go where the person can most use them for a regenerative purpose. And the key issue with these cells, the reason they're so remarkable, is that for unknown reasons, they go into hibernation when we're born. They're like Sleeping Beauty. They go to sleep. And because they're metabolically dormant, they're not dividing. Because they're not dividing, their telomeres aren't shortening. So they basically can stay decades younger biologically than the person. So even just the systemic treatment generally reverses biologic age about 3 years per treatment. That's typically what we've seen. Some people more, some people less. And some things like steroids, corticosteroids, like for joint injections or for certain medical conditions, or just high stress, can reduce or neutralize the effect. The general result, though, is to actually get biologically younger and to have augmented rejuvenation wherever we direct the cells. What's different about the baby is that a genetic disease causes all of her nuclei to collapse. The fundamental defect, which is caused by a single gene mutation. Literally, 90% of cases are the change of an A, an adenine, to a T, a thymine, at position 1824 on a certain sequence on the first chromosome. That one little teeny tiny nucleotide change results in a cascade of effects where the key protein that creates the scaffolding structure to maintain the integrity of the nucleus collapses. And because the nuclei are collapsing, it accelerates DNA damage by a factor of 10-fold. Aging is 10 times faster, and they can succumb as early as age 6 from the diseases of old age. Average survival is only 12 years.
Mm.
So because all of our cells are basically not working, they're quite dysfunctional, unlike other types of genetic diseases where we've seen improvement just with the person's own cells. We have a second FDA acceptance letter for a condition called 10q minus. And that means a loss of genes on the long arm of the 10th chromosome. She's missing dozens of genes. So it's a more major genetic issue. Many genetic diseases are a single gene. This is like multiple genes that are missing. And she's responded remarkably well just using her own cells. So we have one accepted protocol for using a person's own cells, which is almost all of what we do. And then for this very rare condition where all the cells are dysfunctional, it's unlikely that her cells would do a great job. So for her, fortunately, when we did the treatment for her in a hospital in Israel during a ceasefire in the war, that she has a 3-year-old brother who is completely normal and healthy, who has nearly perfectly matched tissue. So if someone gets a major organ like a heart or a kidney, they ideally look for 100% tissue match with certain markers called HLA markers. And if they don't have 100% match, then they generally need to be on immunosuppressive therapy. Well, the VSELs are very early stage. In other work, particularly transplantation work, suggests only a 50% match is needed. And her healthy young brother was a 90% nearly perfect match, almost like an identical twin.
Mm.
So we used his stem cells, used his pluripotent VSELs, and awakened them and gave them to her, and she had several benefits from that.
Okay. Interesting. So there's a genetic mutation. Now, is what you're doing reversing that? What's happening?
What's happening is that her brother's cells, being genetically perfect, are literally providing cells with the missing genetic information.
Mm.
And this case is very unique. Even biology books can be rewritten or new chapters added. If you look at the cell dynamics, because her cells don't divide very well and the DNA injury is 10 times faster, it's probably fair to say you could estimate that her cells divide 10 times as slowly as normal cells, and her brother's cells divide normally. So, with her brother's cells, when her cells divide once, his might divide 10 times. If you do the math on that, every time there's a division for her, her brother's cells outpace them about 500 to 1. And with repeated treatments, especially, there may be a time where the majority of the cells in her body will be those of her normal brother.
Oh, I see. Okay. Interesting.
And she may be able to develop much more normally. There's a characteristic, unusual appearance of these children. Some call it the Benjamin Button disease.
Mm. Hmm.
And with what we're doing, she may be the first person with this condition to be able to develop much more normally. First treatment was when she was 11 months old and live a much longer lifespan.
So it's really interesting because what goes through my mind is, what is she here to teach us?
She might be born for this purpose.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
So then what is that? What is what are we learning, or what are you guys learning from? And you don't have to answer that now, but I'm sure you've thought about it.
Well, since you are, I'm sure, esoterically oriented, being invited to treat this baby was predicted by Intuitive.
Hmm.
In November the year before, she said that you will be invited to treat a baby with a disease that's rare, even among rare diseases. And the baby would recover and it would change medical history.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Oh my gosh.
And then 7 months later, before that 1 year, I got an email from a friend of mine in Israel and asked if I knew anything that could be done for progeria. And I said, I believe I do. And that's how it all began.
Hmm. What do you think about the idea that we only age the amount of time that we experience?
There's probably truth in that. I've seen it said that the only reason people age is because they count birthdays.
I guess what I'm referring to is, if you can stay in the present moment, right? If you can stay in the center of your vortex, then would you age?
That is a complex construct question, because I think there are many factors, conscious and unconscious, that go into it. There's a series of books that I really love called Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East. You're probably acquainted with it.
Yeah, I am.
Jared T. Spalding, written in 1926.
Hmm.
Scientists went to India to prove that the so-called fakirs were fakers, that they were just doing magic tricks to influence people to give them money, basically. And they described finding real masters that could do amazing things, even just go to lunch and manifest their lunch by waving their hands,
Hmm.
you know, and many other things. And one of the things they describe that some of the masters could be documented at a particular birth date and be hundreds of years old and look much, much younger than that. So I believe there is a very big consciousness factor in the ability to simply stay in a biologically young body much longer than at a different state of consciousness. So I think it's a series of consciousness factors, which of course involves clearing the unconscious conflicts, personal and ancestral, that create limitations. and also create biological issues. And to the degree that the psyche is cleared and consciousness is expanded, then among the many benefits can be staying in a young biological body much, much longer. And I'm sure the subjective state of time is much different in that state of awareness than the usual work-a-day reality.
Mm-hmm. I thought there was a quote in there that said to make God, which is the universe and the intelligence that, or the forces that operate the universe, to make God alive and vital to you, you must think and know that you are God. This is the divine science of your being. And I find that really fascinating because, in the Vedic science of consciousness, Vedanta, they tell you right away, or at least I was taught right away, that you don't have to evolve to be, you already are that eternal being. So it's kind of like a dream. When you're in a dream at night, you think you're the dream self, right? And you experience a physical body in the dream, and you experience space in a dream, and you experience objects in the dream. But the whole thing is occurring in your mind. You are the greater consciousness that's having the dream, right? And that's Vedanta is saying the same thing. This all is an illusion. It's also just it's as etheric as a dream, and it's occurring inside our consciousness. So we think we're the human, but we're really the container. And so Vedanta uses your unexamined logic of the unexamined logic of your experience to show you that, to help you expand your awareness to that. So as over time, as your human mind expands and realizes that I'm the container of this, then you start identifying as that God self, right? You start identifying as the container of the dream instead of the dream self, which is this. And when that happens, you activate, in my mind, you're activating new genes in the physical body. But you then also you experience reality differently because the information transfer from the field, which is your mind, to the physical being, your human mind, is greater. And you're also in the present moment when you're doing that. You experience the present moment more because, or your awareness is focused on the present moment more because you realize that you're in a dream. You are realizing that this is occurring inside your consciousness. So it's that expansion of understanding of who you are that allows you, and what reality really is, that allows you to stay really present and start identifying as your eternal self. And then that changes new chemistry in the body, or changes gene expression in the body. And when you're more present, you experience time less, right? You're in the eternal now. So then you don't age.
Well, to the degree that someone is in the state of awareness where they really are in the eternal now and aware of more dimensionality than just the typical 3D reality that our sense organs allow us to do, that would be intrinsically a way to slow it and experientially stop time. If you stop it in your perception, you can shift your biology in a similar way. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. So there is a lot of discussion about being in the now and the concept of the eternal now, that there's actually only one moment that ever exists, and all of time is collapsed into a single point. There's just shifting your awareness along the continuum of eternality from the beginningless beginning to the endless end, that you create a sense of the passage or progression of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because if you are in the present moment and you are understanding that this reality is occurring in your consciousness and you're the field, and the field being your consciousness, then when you stay in that present moment, and if you think of the body as a reflection of your understanding or of your mind, right? So if you stay in the present moment, you know that you are the container. So now the physical body will behave differently and you'll experience it differently. It'll feel less dense. Certain genes are going to start turning on. And it's interesting because I know you're familiar with the guys at RSF or ISF, Nassim Harame's team.
Yeah, we're friends.
Huh?
We're friends.
Yes. I heard William talking about certain neurons in the brain that are turning on dormant DNA that I think I think at this time, I don't think he had evidence of it. I think it was just something he was thinking about that is possible, but that these proteins will turn on and they become active and they keep us entangled with the field more.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So where do you think that the current, or where do you see medicine going?
Huh. How do you mean that?
In terms of this type of the technologies and understanding about health and disease and aging. Because would you say that aging is really just, or disease is really just the body aging?
It's more than that.
Mm.
From the psycho-emotional standpoint, a disease is simply the biological expression of an unresolved unconscious conflict, personal or ancestral, and the brain's way of giving the body what it needs to survive into the next moment. So it has to do with being able to address and clear unresolved unconscious conflicts for you in the ancestry, which could be another parallel to the whole concept of the karmic wheel itself. Like there's a purpose in being born, the parents that are chosen, the life experiences that are created and magnetized. It's all, I believe, and others echo it, of course, that the only reason we're here is to learn and grow, and ultimately they have the realization that we are more than the body, and the issue of, well, you can say I am God, but it's just words. It's more the conscious realization that as part of this whole process, and I could go deep into the whole Eastern mystical cosmology of how the creation began, how it evolved, when the first humans occurred, and the purposefulness of repeated lifetimes to create a balance of awareness, to ultimately take the awareness and consciousness that was grown to go from ordinary perception to the inner planes of consciousness, the ultimate experience of realizing that first to identify that I am a human, and then at another level you realize, oh, I'm actually energy in the subtle planes, and then, oh, well, I'm really the mind and the mental realm, and then the ultimate reality is, as they call it, realization, where I am God. And that's kind of the purpose of the whole process of existence. And it's almost described that the purpose of creation is God, infinite everything, infinite power, love, bliss, and God asking the question, who am I? And that created the apparent separation of this unifying field, this infinite ocean of divine love, power, and bliss, that then these bubbles in the ocean, which were still just drops of ocean, contained in the bubble. And then there was identification with, well, I am this bubble. I am this fish, this rock, this stone, this monkey, and ultimately I am this man. And through the evolutionary process, there's identification with the vehicle, not the ultimate, which is ultimately it's a drop of source that ultimately merges back in source. And the idea that makes sense to me is imagine already that you are all powerful, all knowing, infinite love and bliss. But in a way, if you were that, it's hard to know that you really are all that. So, in the process of creating all sorts of limitation and apparent suffering, then there can be all the possible yin yang experiences of everything. And when you have the ultimate realization, then there's the comparison of the infinite to the limited. So, in a way, it's God being able to experience God's own self and being in a more profound way.
Mm-hmm.
And in that system, it is all an illusion. And one of my favorite quotes in that literature was, "We are all doomed to perfection."
That's right. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. So what I like about the Vedic science of consciousness is they help you put your attention on that part of you because it's here. It already exists. We are just identifying it with the dream self. Right. So as you take your awareness down into the heart or expand into the field, you start to get to then experience yourself as that. And automatically there's physiological changes as well as mental, emotional changes that happen as soon as you do that. So what I like about that system is that it shows you who you are right away. So it's not like this, I have to heal this, I have to heal this, I have to heal this, and then I'm going to be that. It's like, no, you are that already. You're just identifying with your limited self. And yes, even though you know that already and can maybe experience that already, you still might have to go through the unraveling of certain belief systems in order for you to fully embody that part of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, okay. So where do you think the term fountain of youth comes from?
Well, I mean, there is how we historically associate it with Ponce de Leon and his quest for it. It probably goes back to something very ancient, certain springs that were said to grant immortality or eternal youth. It probably goes back as old as human civilization as a concept. Like, what is it that will provide rejuvenation and regeneration? And it's associated with water, which is cleansing, and it's yin, it's Mother Earth energy. I'm not sure where the most original is. If you know, I'd be curious.
I don't, but so what I did when COVID started, even before COVID started, but when COVID hit, I was like, this is the perfect opportunity for me just to go into my heart. And I spent hours a day going into my heart. I was working with someone who had done this kind of work for a really long time. And he showed me how to go into the heart and access different parts of my mind, which was basically the spirit, the causal body, the subtle body, and the physical body, and how to differentiate between those states of being. And after like a year and a half of going deep within, into the center of my chest and just going deep and deep and deep and deep and just never finding an end to it, about a year and a half into it, all of a sudden, one day I just felt this energy just go like rise up out of me. And it's constant now. And I really feel like if I can stay centered there, I think that's the fountain of youth. And I think what that is, this is the center of the toroid.
I like the concept.
And I think it's really interesting to watch humanity right now because all this research on heart-brain coherence going into the heart, right? There's a lot of research here on the heart and the relationship with our heart-brain coherence. But it's really kind of simple because it's like whatever you focus on, you become. So when you bring your awareness down into the heart and you're tapping into the field, then your brain waves are going to match that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Mm-hmm. So it's really a simple concept, but there also is this, what I experience is when I drop my awareness into my heart, I feel this expansion out and I feel this rise of energy that comes up. It feels like what's happening. It feels like the vacuum energy is like filling my physical body and my space-time reality.
Hmm.
And then it enlivens everything. Everything feels really alive and really powerful, and I feel whole and complete. Like when my awareness is there, there's no judgment of anything. As soon as if you what I've noticed is as soon as I start to judge something, then I'm back up here in my human mind. I'm not centered in my causal body, you'd say, or in the field. I'm not centered in the field.
Mhm.
So, so anyway, when I felt that energy come up, that's what I thought of. I thought that's the fountain of youth. And if we can stay centered there and sense and feel that energy continuously, then if the physical body is a reflection of our consciousness, our state of being, then if we practice that all the time, then the physical body would probably go back to its original blueprint. That's what I was thinking. What do you think about that?
Like what you're describing experientially as a metaphor where those that were doing the practice would experience it as a fountain, but a fountain springing up internally. We have the expression of the fountain as water that goes up, but it then spreads out in the way that water moves. That's elegant, and it may not be where the name first came from, but it might be the experience that the concept was drawn from.
Yeah. It's really interesting too, because the Ark of the Covenant, if you look at it, it's the I forgot what the name of those beings on top are.
Cherubim, seraphim,
Yeah. They're
seraphim.
like, if you look at it, it's kind of like right? It's wings. It could be the rib cage.
Mhm.
And in the center is the heart. I don't know, but that's something I thought of too. When I started feeling all this energy come
Mhm.
up, I
Mhm.
thought, is that the Ark of the Covenant? Because whatever we do, we can create, whatever we can do with our own minds, we can create technology to do, right? So, or what we create technology to do, we can do with our own minds, right? So when I heard the description of the Ark of the Covenant and I saw the picture of it and what it does, that's what I thought. I thought it's just reproducing what we are doing here in the heart. I don't know. And what else I think is really fascinating is, the free energy technology that's coming out, and you have to tap the field, right? You have to figure out how to extract the energy from the field. And once you tap it, you're able to continuously extract the energy. And that's that same thing with the heart,
Yeah, that makes sense.
right?
The way to create eternal youth just by having a constant flow of regenerative energy.
Yeah. And I think, once you understand it, you don't have to it's not like you have to keep your attention on it.
Mhm.
But once you understand that you are that, then I think we're going to activate these dormant genes that keep us in coherence or entangled with the field more.
Well, let me go to something since we're talking about awakening dormant areas of DNA. There is an event coming up on Maui, which is called the Aloha Choir. It's the 12th choir in 12 years on 12/12/24. It's all lining up perfectly. And the choirs are essentially, according to one intuitive who's very well published, my friend Lee Carroll, that this is the first time these choirs have happened in 26,000 years, also called Lemurian choirs. And it's large groups of people that sing ancient interdimensional tones. They're probably galactic codes, actually, coming from star systems. The explanation is that it was the Pleiadians. I think there can be arguments over what
Mhm.
star system or another. It seems as plausible to me as any, since if you go to Aboriginal cave painting in Australia, they have literally drawings of the constellation of the Seven Sisters on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And each of the tones, there's now 36 levels, has an intention, and it's powerful on its own. And they're sung together in pairs and create complex interdimensional overtones and harmonics. And the core purpose is to awaken dormant DNA, and particularly interdimensional DNA. And many people have had opening of their abilities to heal, their intuitive capabilities. Conditions have disappeared in the body. And this final choir, we're told, has a particularly unique function, which beyond even basic epigenetics and awakening dormant DNA, is to awaken an otherwise previously even unknown uh, invisible interdimensional 24th chromosome pair. So you can imagine what it would be like to have an interdimensional chromosome that is super physical, that gets awakened, what abilities, experiences, and timelessness may be there. So it's an invitation. This is the final choir of this type. So for those who are interested, uh, it's a happening that when I was given the assignment to create the first one in 2010 with a 2-year lead time, I was told we needed 400 choristers to create the effect. We wound up having over 900. And the experience of being in a room with so many people with precision of intention, we're also told that we were shockingly accurate in recreating it. It's really profound. It's beyond anything that I expected. And so people that are interested in a rapid way, in an individual way to literally just have a whole different expanded experience to awaken codes with patterns that are physical and interestingly, although it's used with the voice, Brian asked me, are there frequencies that are above what the human ear can hear, above 50,000 hertz? And I intuitively said yes. And I checked in an oscilloscope, and there were indeed
Mm.
overtones that were over 50,000 cycles per second, well above the audible range of 20,000 cycles per second. So anyone who might want to have that kind of experience, I'm just letting them know with enough lead time. There's more information at pinealtones.com. I'm definitely planning to be there because I'm the composer, producer, and I've already found 3 of my expert co-conductors to be there, and that'll be an experience. So you can provide that link if you want.
Yeah,
Like that.
I will.
And,
And oh,
please.
so yeah, I find it fascinating because I think it's, we can awaken these things. In my mind, we can awaken these things with sound and light. But then, and so in a way that's like technology to awaken these dormant strands or just dormant genes.
They're frequency codes, and fundamentally everything in the universe is frequency based. Even
Hmm.
say particles, subatomic particles, atomic particles are based upon frequency domains that create out of the infinite potential energy density of the virtual vacuum that tiniest fragment of the energy that there is that we call physical reality, that it is frequency based. And virtually anything you can do with sound frequency, if you go up 40 octaves, you can do with light frequency. So it's sophisticated keys and codes to resonate things, to enhance things, to build the energy of things, to unlock things.
Hmm. And you also do that basically what you're doing that with the laser as well too when you're doing your protocol.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. So is the laser basically a scalar laser?
I rarely talk about this because of the way some people use that term. And scalar has a precise definition. You know what it is?
No.
In physics, the definition of scalar, the technical definition, is simply a magnitude without a direction. And I'll give a way to understand that. So say I do this in my lecture. Say I'm holding a microphone. If I apply 5 pounds of force, it'll accelerate in the direction of the force using Newton's equation, force equals mass times acceleration. If instead I apply 5 pounds of force in the other direction, it'll accelerate the same amount, but in the opposite direction. If I apply 5 pounds of force on both sides, there's no movement. There is a magnitude. The microphone is feeling the stress of whatever force is applied, but there's no direction. There's no net vector. So that would be a scalar. Speed is considered a scalar phenomenon, whereas velocity is a vector attribute. What we're doing with the laser technology, and I really describe it as this, and because you asked the question, I will. The way lasers work, they create waves in phase that are the same wavelength. And when you do the vector addition, you get an amplified wave. We've created a way to align the waves exactly out of phase. And when you do that, it creates a vector sum zero. The vectors cancel. There's no net vector to interact, say, with the electrons, the outer valence shells. So that can go way, way deeper through a medium. The person who was instrumental in my understanding this, Thomas Bearden, his theory was that energy in that form, if it interacted at all, would be with the nonlinearity of the nucleus, which is 100,000th the diameter of the atom. So in theory, energy in that form, basically vector sum zero electromagnetic waves, would go potential 100,000 times deeper through a medium, certainly all the way through human body. We have people who feel the energy go all through their brain from one side to the other. And if they're really sensitive, the person on this side of them feels it go through their brain too. So that part probably really goes through the body, creating whatever interdimensional effects. So technically, yes, it actually is a scalar waveform. And other people call their technology scalar lasers, and they don't really have a technical description that would be accurate to the definition.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I thought of, I think of it in terms of that. So what I feel in the heart energy when it comes out, it feels scalar. It feels when I was in, I don't know if you remember this, but I actually attended one of your procedures when I was down there. And it was one of your, the people in your lab, he was using the laser to direct where the stem cells would go in the person, in the patient. And I could feel it. It felt scalar to me.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize what that word meant until I felt it. And when I felt it in my own body, and then when I was down there, I felt it, and just the first word that came to me was scalar. Now, would you say, because basically, isn't that the energy of the vacuum, right? Would you say that the vacuum is basically a scalar field?
Let me explain.
Okay.
The unique attribute of the vacuum, what we call the 0 point energy, is that at every point in space, the current model suggests that virtual photons are issuing massively in unthinkably vast quantities in every single direction at all different energies for all different durations. And it's massive. So imagine a little 1-inch cube and all little points in that cube. And for every point, these photons that you don't see, they're called virtual. And I'll explain why that is. It's just this massive, unthinkably great seething eruption of these photons going in every direction at all different energies. And they're called virtual because they don't cross a certain threshold for us to perceive them. And there's actually a formula conditioned by Planck's constant that the delta E, the amount of energy, delta T over the amount of time, if it doesn't exceed a certain value, then we don't actually perceive it. And according to the theory, if you took all of the energy and summed it together, there's two different ways. The first way, because these are random going in all different directions at all different energies, if you take all that virtual photonic energy and summed it up, it's a vector sum zero. So that's why it's called the 0 point. There's a massive amount of energy, but we don't perceive it because the vectors cancel. So in a sense, that is a scalar-like concept. The other mind-bending principle is that if you added up all the energy of these photons that you don't really see and convert it to physical energy, convert that to mass, the virtual potential energy in a cubic inch of apparent nothing would create orders of magnitude more mass than the whole known universe.
Mm-hmm. Like 50 orders or something like that.
Something crazy.
Yeah.
Now, what this waveform is doing, what the wave that we're talking about, where the waves are exactly out of phase, what it is doing, it is creating a series of structured potentials in the vacuum of space. If you have structured potentials and align even a tiny fraction of that virtual potential particle flux, you could tap a huge amount of energy.
Okay. And so is that energy healing for everything? So if you had anything that was unhealthy in that environment, would it just bring it back to its natural state because everything is born from that energy?
The concept is reminding the state of its divine eternal perfection. The other thing I didn't describe was the flow of time. Another way of showing the waveform that sums to zero is a sine wave going in this direction, and in phase in the opposite direction is another photon. So it's the positive direction photon versus the minus direction photon conjugated to each other. We add them together. That's also vector sum zero. In terms of the time, this is time forward, and this is time reverse, even according to conventional physics. So time is flowing equally in both directions. So it is, by definition, a timeless wave.
Mm-hmm.
It's a timeless construct. If you get into no time, then there can be an awareness of the original perfect divine state.
Right. That goes back to what I was saying. If you stay centered here, right, aware of the eternal present now.
Mhm.
Now that's the challenge, right? Doing that. But what I found is the more you do it, the more your these inner senses turn on. And I think they're different for each person.
Right. It
Right.
is different. And there are many, many potential layers of awareness that I think the joy is that these unfold for different people in different orders, in different degrees. And it's the excitement of experiencing things beyond what you thought was possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm not sure I ever told you the story, but I did have a spontaneous healing event where my whole body turned into light. And I mean, my bones, my blood, the tendon, everything was light. And it was amazing. I could move my body in ways that I never thought I could.
Yeah.
and I could take in enormous amounts of air. And after that, I could feel, after that experience, everything in my body healed in a split second. I had Hashimoto's, that was gone. I had a shoulder injury where I couldn't even lift this arm up. I could barely lift a glass. I couldn't turn a door handle, and it in a split second gone. Everything was healed. And that's something my human mind could have never thought was possible
Mhm.
until I had that experience. So
Yeah.
yes, it's going to it blows our, and that's basically, I've been on the journey to try to figure out what happened, how I could explain all of that.
Mhm.
But yes, it's unfathomable. And I think that's part of the plan is we're giving ourselves this experience because it's exciting.
Right. And the beauty of it, having had that experience, which is incredibly profound, and I understand and I think it's super cool, is that by virtue of sharing that, what it was and what it did and how the movement of that energy was felt through your body, by expressing it, by sharing that it's even possible,
Hmm.
you literally put into the field the realization that a different level of experience is possible. You make it easier for someone else to have the experience because it's not outside of their reality anymore.
Right. Exactly. I remember I was sharing it in a big class one time, and one woman stood up after me and she said, people say that we should keep that to ourselves. And I was like, why?
Mhm.
Why would we keep that to ourselves?
Right.
That doesn't raise the consciousness of the planet if we do that. Yeah, exactly what you said. So, how do you think, in the Masters of the Far East, how do you think they manifested things out of thin air?
Mhm.
And are you aware of yogic flying?
Yep.
Okay.
I'll give you my theory, and then I'll give you my Instagram so you can follow the various innovative initiatives that we have doing super cool stuff across a broad direction of things physiologic, age reversing, and going into realms of awareness. There are certain masters, not just the ones written about in the 1920s in that book, but those in current times, like Sai Baba, for example,
Mhm.
who was known to walk through a crowd of devotees, and he would literally create this holy ash called vibhuti. It would just manifest around him out of thin air. And someone said, well, maybe he was a magician, he had it in his sleeves and it was coming out. Well, they collect several barrels of it. You can't put barrels of this stuff up your sleeves. And then he would manifest gold rings with diamonds and his image. There were many manifestation miracles or treats that would be sizzling hot. And my theory, especially since we've already given the description of the 0 point energy, the virtual vacuum, that if the logic is if we converted all the energy in a cubic inch of apparent vacuumness of nothing, if that had enough energy that it could create more mass in the known universe, the physical universe we see is just the teeniest, tiniest, infinitesimal fraction of the energy that is there. And at a high level of consciousness, the awareness, whether it's actually brain waves that are creating this balance of waves, or it is a type of consciousness wave that's interdimensional that we can't measure. Imagine that there's all this potential energy enough to create a whole universe of objects. And the balance of consciousness was such that it was structuring potentials in the vacuum of space with intention that you could literally crystallize almost any matter or structure that you wanted by the balance of the brain waves and consciousness to structure the potentials and to crystallize that energy into form.
Hmm. So we'd have to bring our level of awareness down into the field and kind of know we're connected to the field. I mean, we're always connected to the field, but whether we know it and whether we can get that feedback that we need or that's helpful to understand that we are connected and then introduce an idea, then that's what you're basically saying. Yes.
Using thought and consciousness and brain waves literally to think it into form. Yeah.
Mhm.
Intend it into form. Because it may
Yeah.
be beyond thought.
Yeah. I think it's just intention.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, the yogic flying, I really want to interview someone who does that. Um, because all they do is, are you aware of what happens there?
I'm aware of the phenomenon.
Yeah. So they basically they're doing transcendental meditation, and then and what that means is they're merging their individuated mind with the universal mind again, or universal mind, and then they um, introduce a thought. And I don't know the mantra or the sutra that they use for flying, but they introduce a thought, and because they are in that space, they're fully connected to the field consciously. Then it manifests like that.
Mhm.
And I've seen them do it. I haven't done it myself, but I do. My transcendental meditation teacher does it.
Mhm.
So I'm going to have him on. I don't know if he'll reveal it. They're pretty secretive about what's done.
Well, that video, I'm curious myself.
Huh?
I'd like to see that video. I'm curious myself.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you know when I get him on. I'm supposed to maybe in November. He's going to come on. The caduceus, the symbol for the American Medical Association, is, what do you think about that in terms of DNA and expanding consciousness?
It's the same waveform that we use in our laser.
What do you think about it coming apart like that? So you think that that's maybe consciousness unraveling? So our understanding of reality maybe unraveling, like once we start to understand reality, it opens up these genes. It unwinds these dormant genes and activates them.
Well, the genes are the outward expression of the vehicle that we have to express. And it makes sense that we would alter epigenetics depending upon our awareness state. It's already been pretty well shown that diet, lifestyle, and meditation can change the epigenetics, what genes are turned on and turned off. The caduceus has 7 points of crossing, so it's basically a representation of what we describe as the 7 energy centers or chakras. And there are parallels. The wave I described, where the waves are exactly out of phase, if you drew the picture of the waveforms, you would see them crossing. So the waveform we create is that waveform shown in the caduceus. If you looked at them in vectors and you added them together, it would sum to a 0. And there's more than that. Light coming towards you also goes through a polarization cycle. So light coming towards you is in a spiral. When we create the spiral, counter spiral, the phase conjugate wave, we're creating a spiral counter spiral, which is basically the geometry of DNA. So it is those concepts in the waveform that we use basically is geometrically in parallel to the DNA spiral counter spiral. And DNA, I guess in its own way, would be a type of vector sum zero engine as a spiral counter spiral. And that by virtue of being geometrically aligned, there's also the information from Lee Carroll that what our laser is doing is speaking directly to interdimensional DNA, the superphysical part that we don't see. We can't prove that. But we sometimes see phenomena that are so fast that it's not really medically explainable, kind of like the type of healing that you were describing. And other symbols like the yin and yang, it's the same. It's the contrapposition in perfect balance. There are many metaphors, but I think particularly the caduceus symbol, since I'm in medicine as well, it's also representation of the rising kundalini. That's because at the base it has to come up in a parallel way or it stops if it gets out of balance. And when it gets to the top, then there is the expansion of awareness, the thousand.
Well, what's really interesting is that when I had that experience, right before it happened, like, just moments before I actually blew up into light, I felt completely weightless. So I was just going to lay down next to my daughter, and all of a sudden I felt like, I noticed it in my head first. I was like, my head feels weird. I thought, did I get dizzy? But you don't get dizzy sitting down, you get dizzy standing up. And so I sat up and I looked out in the room, and everything was like suspended. Everything was like light suspended in space. And I could see that even space was like an illusion. It was like a dream. It was like, when you walk up to a mirage in the desert and then it starts to disintegrate, the room in front of me was starting to go away, just like I was waking up from a dream. And I could see it was just light. Everything was light suspended in space. And I felt at one with it. Like I could see my body. I put my arms in front of me and I saw my arms, but they felt completely empty. They felt like just like empty space. And I realized that that was Maya. That was like, it was a dream. I could see Maya, what Maya actually is. It really is an illusion. But the reason I brought this up is because I felt completely empty here. Like this felt like my whole head was just, just like space. And then it was later on, because I didn't understand what was happening, I thought I was having a stroke. I don't know why, but I just didn't understand what was going on because I'd never felt that way before. And then eventually my heart started racing really fast. All this energy was coming up and I had to vomit. And I did. And then after I did, then I just felt this like explosion of liquid electric energy. That's what I say. It felt like that just shot from like my chest area and it filled my entire body. And then everything just like went off like light. So, I don't know if that was my crown opening or what, but
sounds like a Kundalini enlightenment experience.
Yeah, because when I was, so I felt light. And then because I didn't understand it, the first thing I thought was, am I having a stroke? And so I went over to my boyfriend at the time and I said, I don't know what's happening. But then I was feeling myself rise up. I felt like this expansion up and I thought I was leaving my body. I thought I was dying because I'd never felt that before. Now I understand what it is. It's just me. I was expanding into, we are this entire, everything I see in front of me is me, is happening in my mind. So I'm the container, right? I'm an unbounded field of consciousness. Mm-hmm. And so I was rising up to be that, but I didn't understand it. So I thought I was leaving my body. I thought I was dying. And then my heart started beating really fast. It was like, and I was like, oh my God, this is a stroke. And then I felt this urge to vomit. And then after that, then the light, it just shot out. So I think that was a Kundalini rising experience. And what was interesting is that just my head, it just felt so empty. And then the rest of the night after I exploded into light, the rest of the night, my head was just buzzing. It was just all this energy going. It felt like it was moving from front to back for the next 24 hours. It was doing that.
That's a really amazing.
Yeah, it was an amazing experience. I think you said you had some experiences like that too, or some supernatural experiences.
For sure. I'll have to save it for part 2.
Okay. Okay.
Move back into my clinics.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for the time. And I look forward to, if we can, speak again, because I have so many questions I'd like to ask you, but we covered a lot today and I want to thank you again for joining me.
Well, thank you. And we're sharing more of our stories and information, really starting basically, but aiming to be as sophisticated as this very high level discussion.
Yeah.
Simply at Dr. Todd O, DRTODDO. So
yes, Dr. Todd O. And then also you'll have to send me, what was the link for the Maui event or the
pinealtones.com.
Pinealtones.com. Okay. All right. Thanks very much, Dr. Todd.
That was awesome.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.